A growing number of Republicans are speaking out against Donald Trump's dinner with a white nationalist, including his former vice president now. In an interview yesterday, Mike Pence denounced Trump's meal last week with Holocaust denier Nicholas Fuentes and disgraced rapper Kanye West.
It's wrong to give a white nationalist, an anti-Semite and a Holocaust denier a seat at the table. And I think he should apologize for it, and he should denounce those individuals and their hateful rhetoric without qualification. I think the president demonstrated profoundly poor judgment in giving those individuals a seat at the table.
So that was actually a full-throated, robust response to it, where
really
he's
was.
calling on the former president to apologize for what he's done. It's very different than saying, yeah, maybe I would have done something different, or I wouldn't have done that, and kind of hemming and hawing out of it. That was, Mike Pence is lining up.
Well, I mean, he's doing what he should be doing.
Should have been, some would say.
Well, but we don't, again.
I know.
They played Just As I Am. Mike's walking down to the front, and the invitation, we're just going to accept him.
He was his vice president.
Not going to ask, but we're glad.
Really? Okay.
We're glad that
I'm going to work on that one.
You're not glad that he didn't?
I'm glad, but
but he did it.
Okay.
Right? He did it.
He did it.
He did it. Mark that down. One step forward, right?
One step forward.
And he did it, Willie. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Okay. He did it without qualification. He said Trump should apologize without qualification. And at least in that clip we heard, there wasn't any qualifying, there wasn't any hedging, anything like that. So, I mean, it's funny. I mean, we can't do shows for like 80 weeks going, people must say this, people must say this. And then they say it, then we go, yeah, but he said it. It's a positive step forward. Of course, we've talked every day ad nauseum about what these people have not done over the past 6 years, and for good reason. But
it's happening.
Let's celebrate that Mike Pence said he needed to apologize without qualification.
He did say it, and he's not alone in saying it. We're also together not saying that the Republican Party is completely turning its back on Donald Trump. We've been through too much. We know better. But in this moment, they are saying it. Now, with that caveat, we can say that, yes, this is an easy one, right? That Donald Trump sat down with a Holocaust denier and a white supremacist. That should be an easy thing to condemn. And Mike Pence did say later in that interview he doesn't believe Donald Trump is an anti-Semite, partially because his grandchildren are Jewish. Trump also facing backlash, as I said, though, from Republicans in the Senate, along with Mike Pence. Here's some of their responses when asked by reporters about the former president's dinner with the white supremacist and Holocaust denier.
The meeting was bad. He shouldn't have done it. But again, you know, there's a double standard about this kind of stuff, and I don't think it'll matter in terms of his political future. But I do believe we need to watch who we meet with.
I wouldn't want to have dinner with either one of those guys, or I wouldn't meet with either one of those guys. You make the most of that you want to.
He surely would disavow any of that stuff. Most would. How he took a meeting, I don't know.
There's no room in the Republican Party for white supremacists, anti-Semitism, so it's wrong.
I think it's ridiculous that he had that meeting. It's ridiculous, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Just crazy.
I think it's disgusting to invite people like that to meet with a former president of the United States. I think it's been clear that there's no bottom to the degree to which President Trump will degrade himself and the nation.
John, you can almost hear it in the voices of those senators. I do not want to answer questions about Donald Trump for the next 2 or 6 years. You can see the exhaustion on their faces. That said, if he becomes the nominee, it may be another story.
We also see the beginnings of a beard on Mitt Romney's face, which we both were taken aback by when we saw it. But setting that aside, yes, these are the senators, some of whom Romney in particular, and Blood occasionally, would speak out against Trump, even when Trump was in office. Lindsey Graham's a different story. Some of even Trump's allies are saying, look, this is a bridge too far. But as we know, this is a layup. And this is also, we'll see how fleeting this is. Is this just the latest Trump controversy that is supplanted by another Trump controversy in a matter of days, and we all move on? But I think the larger point is the word exhaustion. There are a lot of Republicans who are just tired of Trump. They recognize, look, we're not saying they're turning the page on this. We've done that too many times. We all know that no one should bury Trump as the head of the political future until the head of the political party that is the Republican Party, until he actually is gone. But right now there is a sense of like he's just the past and he is exhausting. And more Republicans are suggesting we're tired of talking about 2020. We're tired of being swept up in whatever nonsense he creates out of Mar-a-Lago. The question will be, do DeSantis or another leading Republican figure who's taking him on in 2024, and maybe that's Mike Pence, although I don't think many see him as a serious contender for the Republican nominee, do they fully break with him and rally supporters to finally leave Trump? So far, they haven't. Polls suggest Trump's still the guy, but this is clearly wearing on the leaders of the party, if no one else.
Well, and again, just having to constantly be answering questions about Donald Trump. Of course, some people say, oh, you people in the media are... No, don't try the anti-Trumpism BS on us when the guy sits down with a neo-Nazi who says that Jews that died in the Holocaust, he compared them to like burnt cookies, and has said just extraordinarily heinous things about not only Jews, but so many other Americans. But I thought it was interesting. There was a sliding scale there. You could almost hear Lindsey Graham going, yeah, I wouldn't meet with him. It's bad, but... All right, so that was not unequivocal. I certainly give you that. Some of the others seemed tepid. It's interesting. Rick Scott was fairly straightforward there. Joni Ernst, Katty Kay, tough. Joni was really tough. Senator Ernst, very tough, calling it ridiculous.
Disgusting.
Mitt Romney, also... very harsh about it. And what's interesting is that we are hearing Republican senators being critical of Donald Trump. Sort of feeds into what we've been saying here for quite some time. There are three parties. There's the Democratic Party, there's the Republican Senate Party, and there's the Republican House Party. Interesting, not surprising, unfortunately, and sad and pathetic that we haven't heard Kevin McCarthy. We haven't heard other leaders of the House Republicans come out and criticize Donald Trump. Why? Because they don't get to become Speaker unless certain people who have actually spoken to white nationalist conventions with this guy there, introducing them, I think, without their support. So Kevin McCarthy thinks his support it depends on having white nationalists and supporters of neo-Nazis voting for him for Speaker of the House. Where does that put the House Republican Party in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is not the party of Mitt Romney and Joni Ernst, is it? They were very clear in their condemnation, and you probably wouldn't find them in the House of Representatives. I mean, you've got some moderate Republicans in the House of Representatives. They're just not the ones with the loudest megaphones, and they're not the people who, at the moment, Kevin McCarthy feels he needs to win over if he's going to get that speakership. Although, to be honest, that speakership is going to be such a hell of a job. Lord knows why he might even want it, because if he's going to have to be continuously in hoc to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and the others in that wing, and Jim Jordan and the others in that wing, in the very Trumpian wing of his party, his job is going to be both a nightmare and almost impossible to do. So he may rethink all those years of craving that job, because I don't quite see what's in it for him beyond pure ambition. No, clearly he knows which way the votes lie, and the votes don't lie with the moderates of the party at the moment. I mean, it is a very different Republican Party. Although I would say, yes, we've heard these senators come out. But as Mika said, it's pretty clear. I mean, this was a pretty clear moment for condemnation. And Lindsey Graham slightly, somebody on the staff should get fired moment. What he said was not exactly a massive repudiation of Donald Trump's own choices.